By now, your Cymbidium orchids should have finished flowering. Mine are flowering a lot later this year because we've had a colder, wetter winter, which does prolong the flowering period. However, once your orchids have finished flowering, if you want to get the best out of Cymbidiums, there's a few things you need to do. So here's some tips. Firstly, Cymbidium flower spikes must be removed once they're finished. If your plant is root-bound or very full in the pot, don't be scared to break it up. A sharp knife cut through the middle will not hurt it. Break it apart, and now you'll have two plants. So to get the very best results out of your orchids, you need to have a specialist orchid mix. Now, there are different types of orchids. For example, Cymbidium orchids tend to grow in the forks of tree trunks on the edge of branches. They love a big, coarse mixture. This one from Scott's is absolutely brilliant. It is a really good mix, and all you do is simply pot your plants in. Now, I should tell you, there's a couple of different types of Cymbidiums too. There's cascading flowers that can weep over the pot, which are great for hanging baskets, and then there are upright forms like this, which is exactly why it's going into a pot. So this is going to go in here. I'm going to fill this potting mix in around the outside edge. It's going to look fantastic. These cascading forms of Cymbidiums are great when they're planted in hanging baskets. Pop the orchids in the basket, adding a controlled release fertilizer tablet on each side of the pot. Then pot the soil around the roots, watering it in with some sea salt. Sea salt reduces transplant shock, it stimulates new root growth, and I believe it activates soil microbes to produce a kind of soft fertilizer for developing roots. And there's no doubt that this is your safety mechanism. Any transplanting or planting finished with a soak of sea salt, get your plants through. Now, your orchid is going to grow really well in a shaded position from August right through to February. But in February, March, there's something very important you have to do if you want to get beautiful flowering results next season. You need to increase the amount of light it's getting, which means moving your plants from a shaded position to morning sun position. Watch them carefully. You don't want them to be fully exposed on a scorching day, but you do need at least 4 hours of morning sunlight, ideally, to trigger flower bud production. If you're not sure where to put them, remember the sun sets in the west. It passes overhead to the north of us slightly in February, and this means that the southern side of your house is going to be the best protected position. Now, when it comes to getting great flowering results, well, there's two things you need to keep in mind. The first one is, of course, making sure you're using the right fertilizer. It doesn't matter what you use between July and February. In fact, if you're using a high nitrogen fertilizer, it's going to encourage lots and lots of leaf growth. But once you've got to February, well, you do need to change the type of plant food you're using so that you're encouraging flower production. It's the P and K in your fertilizer analysis that's so important to look out for. A high K in particular is vitally important for all flowering and fruiting plants. Now, there are several ways that you can feed your orchids to get the right result. And this is from March through to June. You use a high P specialised spray like that, mist and feed, or alternatively, this is another great way to go. Pour and feed, and it's just putting 1 cup per week over each plant, and the results are incredible. In fact, you'll find the flower, if you do that from the beginning of March right through to June, is spectacular. There you go, Orchids 101 with Cochrane.